What about then, not long after, you were in the studio working with Frank Sinatra?
Yeah, Watertown.
Mm.
Another one of my failures. That was great.
Mm.
Working with Frank and spending time with him, and the stories, and watching how people dealt with a living legend. It was. I felt like I was making a documentary.
Mm.
You know, I wish I was, because it would have been fantastic. But he again was the consummate professional in the studio. He had a temperament, no doubt, and to get him to do more than one or two takes was a little difficult. No less punching in and recording, overdubbing it as opposed to live. But it was a brilliant time for me. You know, I felt like I could do no wrong.
Mm. And you had a long history with Neil Diamond.
Yeah, we did, I think, 6 albums together.
So obviously that was a successful relationship.
That was a very successful relationship, and we also did You Don't Bring Me Flowers with Barbara and Neil, and that was a great time.
Wow.
That was a moment, certainly in my life.
So how do you control two legends like that? You've got Neil Diamond and Barbara Streisand in the studio, and you're the one producing it.
It's interesting because you know, you've probably read a lot about Barbara. She will test people. She's pretty much able to do almost anything. So she can direct, she can produce, and she obviously sings like a Stradivarius. So yeah, she's tough. She's tough to deal with in that respect. And we had maybe a minute and a half of testing very early on about what takes would be used, and she noticed I wasn't making any notes on take 1, take 2, what would be the better take, etc. And I just said, and she smiled, and that was the end of it. And from that point on, we were all in sync.
Yeah, it's amazing the people that you have had the opportunity to work with, and even though it was one song, Michael Jackson.
Yeah, Michael was a joy. He it's a very sad time for the music business, for the fans, for me, for anyone that's worked with Michael. And you know, paraphrasing what Quincy said, Michael was just a study in what should be done and how music should be treated, and he had a total respect for the business, the people in it, the history, the musicians. He was just a brilliant and unfortunately tragic personality. I worked with him, I believe he was 15 or 16, so I didn't see a whole lot of what came after, you know, and he was just a joy, just a joy to work with.
How would you compare that life to the life of Elvis Presley then?
Well, I suspect both of them had such a huge amount of pressure on them on a daily basis. I don't suspect, I know. I met Presley in Vegas, and he was like an 8x10 glossy, you know, and he moved. He was just a stunning human being, and very soft-spoken, amazing singer. But at some point, I don't have to deal with that. I've never had to. You know, Frankie does, and the Presleys and people, and Neil, and it's got to be extremely difficult to be able to pull yourself out of that and get right back to the heart of what it's all about, and that's the music, whether you're writing or performing. So I have a lot of compassion for Michael and Presley, and can understand any time that they would have made a potential turn to the wrong side. It's so easy. You know, there's a line in our show, you sell 100 million records, see how you handle it. And that's so very true. There's so much pressure coming from every angle imaginable. So to be able to still keep yourself together and deal with it and still make music, I mean, that's an incredible feat.
Let's talk about one of the more positive aspects of the career there. One of the successes, a lady called Judy coming into your life,
Yeah.
and a couple more Four Seasons hits, Who Loves You and December 1963.
Yeah, well, December 60 and 1963 in particular was a moment in my life where I rarely have tackled lyrics on my own. Sherry, a few things, Big Man in Town, I think, and so on. And I tackled that one on my own. And the original lyric was December 1933, which was the repeal of Prohibition. And it really sucked. I mean, it was an embarrassing lyric. In fact, Rolling Stone printed a copy of it, especially to embarrass me. Went into the studio. We made the track. The band rehearsed it, and it was a great track. It was just one of those joyous. You could listen just to the track. It felt so good. And Frankie pulled me aside and said, "I don't know, Bob. The lyric is. I don't know if we're going to get through this." I said, "You mean it sucks?" He said, "Well, yeah." He said, "But the track's so good. It's a shame." I said, "Well, I mean, we have a couple more days left. I don't think this can be redone. So we'll just have to dump it. We have enough to cover." And he said, "Well, yeah, it's a shame." But anyway, that went off. And next morning, Judy had apparently stayed up most of the night, and she showed me this lyric, and I said, "Bingo, this is good. I need to do this and I need to do that and change the bridge and so on," and did some rewriting for the melody. But essentially the track and the chord structure was perfect. So we went into the studio and here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you married at that point?
No. So I did marry her.
Yeah.
The next day. No, I'm kidding. No, and then Who Loves You? We did a whole album. So it was a whole comeback time. We've had a lot of comebacks.
But right at the point of the disco boom too, wasn't it, when those two songs hit?
Yeah, something, we often get pegged as probably the Black Eyed Peas or some groups that do rhythmic records that are very danceable and probably get a huge amount of play in clubs. But I never intended for Who Loves You to be a disco record, nor Oh What a Night. And in fact, at the time, Oh What a Night probably wasn't even the right tempo. But somehow it's evolved into being club records, especially Oh What a Night, recently in different incarnations coming back, and the French version, the rap thing with Yannick and so on. So I don't consider probably Barry Gibb would say the same thing. I don't think he sat down to make a disco record. Maybe a couple, but there's a lot of things that the Bee Gees have had played in clubs big time, and they were just good records, good rhythmic records.
Well, it's great to get you out here and hear the story of Jersey Boys and the Four Seasons, and wow, what a career you've had.
Thank you. Yeah.
Looking back at it, would you have changed anything?
No, certainly not with the Jersey Boys now currently. And for me to watch that, there are nights where I'll watch the show and say, "Wow, that was a pretty exhausting career." And sometimes I do get exhausted.
Yeah. Well, it must be great to be able to sit back and just watch your career.
It is.
With someone else doing it up there on stage.
And not break a sweat. It's the best.
Bob Gaudio, it's great to have you here.
Thank you
for joining us here at Undercover.
Thank you. Pleasure.